It is certainly your right and your time.
Good evening. Chad Stubenbort, resident of Monroeville.
Please sign in.
I can do that for you. All right. A few questions for the solicitor, if you don't mind, Mr. Ratcher. In what instances can an ordinance be overturned, and who would have the authority to override or not follow an ordinance?
When you say overturned, do you mean by an action of council?
And not by an action of council, or at least not publicly.
Well, there has to be an action by council. Ordinances are adopted by council.
Okay.
Council's the only party that has the authority then to override that ordinance. Essentially, it's a law, and they have the right to repeal those laws if they choose to do so.
Okay, that was my understanding. I just wanted to clarify. On April 20th, I sent an email out in regards to a few signs that were placed on public property. In response, I got an email from the manager, actually to another private citizen's email, and all of council was also copied on it. It stated there are a multitude of political signs within the right-of-ways and within public property. They all are in violation and should be removed, but sometimes prudency has to prevail. As a result, we're going to let political signs stay, so not to have unintentional bias provoked, provided, however, there's not any impediment to traffic. So my question, really where I just want some guidance, is Ordinance 2116 prohibits any signs being on public property. That was signed by Mr. Bond and Mr. Logan in July of 1999. Further goes on to state the reasoning as to why: impediment of traffic, cluttering of public property, getting in the way of grass cutting, etc. And then goes on to say that once notified, people will be notified they have a day to remove the sign. If it's not removed, the municipality will remove it and then bill whoever sign it was. After 3 days, if it's not removed, there's additional fines up to $650 up to $600 and up to 30 days imprisonment. So I just wanted to clarify. I just want to kind of get a working knowledge as to where we can place signs. I know there's obviously a few weeks here, and then obviously we have an election again come November, and I just want council's guidance as to where we can place signs and what will happen to signs on public property.
Everybody looking at me?
Well, I think we need to go through a little bit of a point A to point B to point C here.
I agree.
I think what happened, to my knowledge, and as I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago, and as you are aware, I was not aware of some of the things you were aware of, but be that as it may.
Correct.
I think some of the first signs showed up, as I understand it. And if I'm misrepresenting anything here, anybody knows better, please tell me. Some signs showed up, and so the inspectors were taking signs out of the right-of-way, the public right-of-way. One of the candidates questioned it, and as a result of that, I think they said, okay, we've got to review this, we've got to figure out how we're going to do this. And Tim, you might want to comment on it, because I think this is where you kind of took over and made a decision relative to what was going to be done and not done.
Chad, as you well know, as I told you, you and I talked on the phone. We have a candidate who come in and said it's a takings to take the signs out, which, you know, I'm not an attorney, but it's not. So he proceeded to put his signs most of the time in the right-of-way. But the thing we have to keep in mind here for all the candidates running is their First Amendment rights to run and freedom of speech for them, okay? And we do have a right-of-way ordinance. Now, technically, you talk to Mr. Hugas, and he will have to follow the ordinance and say, yes, all the signs should come out. Now, as I said in my email to council, which I'm sure you have a copy of, we have rights-of-ways in the roads. For the benefit of the public, if you don't know what a right-of-way is, it gives the public entity and an authority a right to go onto an easement, a right-of-way to maintain the utilities, to maintain the road. And the ordinance states that you cannot have any signs, political signs, real estate signs, signs promulgating something at the high school or whatever. You cannot have it. To regulate that is extremely difficult. Everybody in this room sees all the signs, and if you take them all out, the question becomes, is it in the right-of-way? Most old right-of-ways are 33 feet, 16 and a half feet from the middle of the road. Your more subdivisions that were built in the 60s and 70s are 50 feet. Your major arteries, Route 22, Route 286, they're 120, 150 feet. Now, if you have a candidate, or anybody in this room, you don't know really where the right-of-way is. You can guess, but you don't know. So now a candidate goes out and he puts his in the middle of the, or in the right-of-way, out of the right-of-way. He doesn't know, or she doesn't know. So we have code enforcement officers that go out there and they have to take them all out. So, as Chad just got done saying, that means all, virtually, adverb virtually all the political signs that are up will come out. Now, prudency has to prevail. If I told Paul, and he and I talked about this at length, if I told him, enforce the ordinance to the letter of the law, all the political signs are coming out, I think we'd get a few phone calls. What do you think?
I agree, but you're sidestepping the original question, the email. That was my email, and also now I know another private citizen's email because I was copied on her email, which said public land, which is what Ordinance 2116
Different story, Chad.
is talking about. Well, and that's what I'm here to talk about, is the public land.
Public land is a different
2116.
conversation.
I'm not here to present another candidate or to talk about 1443 or 1893, just 2116, which is public property.
Mayor, can I interject I apologize, Chad.
You're good.
You're referencing Ordinance 2116. That is not the most recent ordinance. 2145 is the ordinance we enforce. It was adopted after that.
Which still says not in public property.
No, it does not. This references public property. This references public rights-of-ways.
Correct.
They're two different things.
Correct, but unless it's... What it says here is if it's not redacting anything in here, this would still be enacted, correct? If it's not redacting, saying you can place signs on public property, it is illegal to place signs on public property in Monroeville, correct?
Yeah, and I think this public property versus public right-of-way is sort of like the growing season thing. I think it probably could have been...
Well, because public property, I could put a sign, you know, if we're allowed to put signs on public property, I could put one in front of the municipal building, right?
I'd like to make a statement on this. I believe, I've been here quite some time, I believe that ordinance was established to get the signs off of all these streets that are, I mean, you look on 22, it's a disgrace.
Correct.
You go to Plum, you go to Penn Hills at election time, North Huntington where my daughter lives, I mean, it's insane.
Correct.
I think this ordinance, the way I believe it was meant to be, is private property. If I want to put a sign in my yard, now regardless of right-of-way, it's in my front yard, on my public property, that's entirely up to me.
Correct.
You know, I believe that's what it was.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. That's my problem is there's still signs and pictures were submitted of signs that were on public property.
And
So I just want to know if that's going to be addressed or if I should place signs in public.
I personally feel, and I abided by that rule when I ran.
Correct.
So you're not talking about the right-of-way, you're talking about public
No, I
property.
don't expect people to go out there with the measuring tape and
We don't want
pick
them
out
in front of
signs.
schools or in front of this municipal building or...
That's all I want to know is if there is a level playing field or not, if we submit, because again, if
That's a given. Yeah, that's...
Well, the
Well, that's
public placement should be addressed.
And that's my
To
main
Steve's
concern.
point, if it's in someone's private citizen's front yard,
You should have
with
went
their
right to that
permission,
point.
they should be allowed to
I
have it
missed-
there.
I did go to that
Well,
point.
you-
In my
you
email, I went to that
found
point, and then I talked to
clean the
the manager
neighborhoods
who
up.
then yelled at me
Or to
and belittled
clean
me.
the right-of-ways up.
Yeah, I think where it is right now, Chad, is that based upon what's taken place, there are a lot of signs up, many of them are in the right-of-way. Now, if somebody comes and plants a sign 6
Across
feet
the
outside the door here, the municipality's probably going to take it down, because there is a prohibition against them being on what is called in 2145 public lands,
Right.
which may or may not be the best way to draw a distinction between rights-of-way and actual public properties where public buildings are located.
Correct. And that's all. I just want to make sure that it's a level playing field for all candidates involved, that we
It
can't place
is.
them on
And I believe...
Right under a melon plant sign.
Well,
right under
yeah,
Alpine
we
Village
talked
sign.
about the piece of property.
I
Ken.
noticed the one right under the melon plant sign was actually removed.
There
All
were
the-
several
yeah,
that
all the
are
ones you
removed, and
talked
there's
about have been removed.
others out there. So I
Yeah,
just want to make sure.
some have been removed.
But why?
I think it was removed because
If
of,
we're allowing this to go on, why remove them?
I don't know who, I'm not
Public
saying, I'm
land.
just saying, I noticed
We're talking
that there
about
had
public
been one there for
Not the right
someone
of way.
running for school board, and it was removed.
Correct.
And I don't have any idea who removed it, but
I just want guidance. I
Just
think,
one last
as a lot of
thing,
candidates do.
the times that I've been asked about it recently, the guiding principle, the underlying principle to all this is, treat everybody the same way. So even if you're not interpreting your ordinance properly, or you're not doing something exactly as you should, as long as you treat everybody who's a political candidate the same way, I think you stay out of trouble. That's the most important thing to do, and then from there, we can all figure out how to make it better. or how to
I couldn't
make it
agree more. I just want to make sure,
Yeah.
the email says that we're going to leave them all up, and if that were the case, I was going to throw one up front, but I just want to make sure that
Oh,
was...
go ahead, Chad. You like to start trouble. Just
Thank you,
stop it. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is...